Welcome into another edition of New Track Record from the WELT studios here in Fort Wayne. Caleb Hatch, Justin Kinney with you another week, and we have begun the Olympic break, so we're going to have some fun doing some speculation this episode. Talk silly season stuff. But first, hi, Justin.
Hello, Caleb. How are you?
Doing well, and Teddy's been doing well, so that's the update there.
It's the most important update.
Yes, it's going to be a long grind, though, of probably definitely another month, probably another 2 months or something in between. But here we are, and we shift to talking IndyCar. And surprisingly, because August 1st came and went, we're recording this Friday, August 2nd in the morning here in the U.S., but I thought we might see something come down because August 1st is always seen as that deadline for... drivers can start talking to other teams and maybe stuff could be finalized. Like, other sports leagues have what they call legal tampering, which is hilarious. Sure. Is that the NFL or NBA? I forget which league.
I think it's the NBA that has the legal tampering.
That sounds right. Because pretty much all the free agent contracts are done before free agency begins. So, which is always just kind of confusing.
It's like once free agency opens, there's like a multitude of signings right away.
Yes.
You see it in the NFL too. Everybody's tampering, quote unquote, but we don't have those kind of rules in IndyCar, and that's why a lot of discussion and a lot of rumors being thrown around.
Yeah, so August 1st, generally that time when drivers can start talking to other teams, but we've yet to see any official announcements for 2025 post-deadline. We've, of course, seen other driver announcements. So we're going to go team by team, take a look at the 2025 IndyCar silly season, and make some predictions based on where things are at now and where we think they will be for 2025 when it comes to driver lineup. So we start off, and we're just going to go in alphabetical order to make it easy. We start with AJ Foyt Racing. They always have Santino Ferrucci and Stingray Robb for this season. I think they're both back. I know you think only one of them are back next year.
I have a hard time seeing Stingray Robb back in this seat next year. I just think if Foyt is, and make no mistake, they've had a tremendous season with Santino Ferrucci, sitting 10th in points right now, around there ish.
Yes, 10th.
If you want to keep up the momentum for Santino Ferrucci and give him a capable keyword teammate, I think you need to make a change. Stingray Robb, best finish this year is 15th. It's just, if you want to continue the momentum, I feel like AJ Foyt needs to make a move and bring somebody else in. Is that a definite? I don't know. Who knows? You think he's back, but I just feel like if AJ Foyt wants to take the next step, you bring somebody else in.
I think, so it was a multi-year deal, right? He brings a lot of funding, and it doesn't seem like there's been any issue, right, with the funding. I haven't heard any rumors of anything like that. And he is on the cusp of that leader circle. It's really hard to tell because there are some entries that aren't, that don't qualify. So like the 11 doesn't qualify. The 4 doesn't qualify. So those cars are out. He's very close. Like, we're talking a margin of basically, 10 points?
Yeah. It would be nice if IndyCar actually had a standings of the car entries so we could keep track of leader circle. Wouldn't that be tremendous? You would think
it's the most exciting part outside the championship, and when you look at how things shake out. Every year it seems to be closer and closer at the back.
Right. And other than the Wikipedia page, which isn't always updated in a timely manner. It is as of today, but you would think the series would have something, the official standing somewhere on their website or app. But, I guess that's too much to ask for IndyCar. That's kind of where we're at.
So who do you think would be in place of Stingray Robb? You think Ferrucci's back?
Ferrucci definitely is back.
Here's my thing with Ferrucci. So I think he's back because I don't think there's a better option.
Well, that's the thing. That's the only
thing. Rahal hasn't shown speed at Indy. They've struggled to qualify the last couple of years, so I don't think there's a better option out there.
That's the thing.
And that would, in theory, be the better option, but with the Penske Alliance, you don't want to leave that.
I would agree. I think Santino Ferrucci's having tremendous amount of success. He has to look at Ray Hall similarly to what you have with Christian Lundgaard and be like, yeah, I'm going to leave RLL because every May it's a struggle. Even when they say it wasn't going to be anymore, it was a struggle. So for Ferrucci, I think his best option right now is AJ Foyt Racing. In terms of who could be in that seat, I mean, somebody else that brings funding, if it's that big of a deal. I think we're going to talk about Devlin DeFrancesco in several different scenarios. I could see maybe that at AJ Foyt Racing. But in terms of a definitive second guy, I'm not really sure. But if you want to continue the forward momentum, I understand the finances. We're going to talk about that a lot in these hypotheticals as well. But if you want to bring somebody else in that's going to complement Ferrucci better, I think there's a wealth of guys out there.
I'm going to throw a name out there, Jacob Abel. Now, remember, Abel's trying to get into IndyCar, Abel Motorsports. They run in the series formerly known as Indy Lights, and he's second in the standings. He's essentially ready to move up. I don't think there's really any doubt there.
Right.
Do they maybe do a partnership and then run with Foyt, and then maybe Foyt has like a third entry for the 500? The Abel maybe fills that slot. I don't know. To me, that seems like maybe an outside shot because I don't think Abel Motorsports is going to be an IndyCar as a standalone entry next year.
No, I don't think so. I think it could be maybe a supporting team, maybe. But Abel hasn't done any IndyCar races yet, right?
No.
So it's hard to keep track with all these guys that have seen action. I mean, we have had upwards of a dozen rookies this year in some capacity, at least 10. So tough to keep track. But when you look at Jacob Abel, I could see that still in the championship race for Indy Lights. And if he does indeed win that, he has to go somewhere, at least for a 3-race deal. So it's an interesting proposal, Jacob Abel. 12
is the number I got to. That's including, of course, Kyle Larson, who's a rookie. I mean, I just went all rookies, and then also like Linus Lundqvist, still a rookie, even though he did a couple races last season. So I don't know. That's my outside shot, but I really think that lineup stays.
Okay. Doesn't, and that's another thing we need to consider. Doesn't add, doesn't contract. Do you still think 2 cars for Foyt next year? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. In terms of full time, yes.
Gotcha.
Andretti Global, they're pretty much locked in. I don't expect any changes for their driver lineup.
No, I don't think so. I mean, you got Herta, Kirkwood, Ericsson as your primary 3. We have, I don't know if it's officially, I mean, Marco's going to be back, right?
For 500.
Indy, for the 500. Could you see a 5th 500 entry out of Andretti?
No, but I could see a partner team where maybe there's like an extra entry.
Now, MSR is supposedly switching, right?
To Ganassi.
So what does that mean for Andretti, if anything?
Well, the rumor this week, so Racer.com and Marshall Pruitt's mailbag is that so Andretti, because they're moving from Acura to GM and Cadillac and IMSA next year, remember they have the Cadillac program they're trying to put together for F1 to start a team. That's been delayed at best. But then also there's a rumor of Andretti going from Honda to Chevy. Now, no plans to leave Honda is what Pruitt is saying after speaking with Andretti CEO Rob Edwards. However, Andretti's contract is believed, and this is the keyword, believed, to run through 2025, so they could switch come 2026. And Chevy says they're telling parties they're full after adding the 2 new cars from Prima, so 3 more from Andretti doesn't seem to be working out math-wise, Pruitt's saying, for 25, but maybe for 2026. And then that kind of gets to, who that partner team be? Well, we have some guesses, and we'll get to that when we get to that team.
Well, and 2, to push back on that, Chevy, they'll add 2 with Prima, and they're telling people they're full. So if, let's say hypothetically, Andretti goes to Chevy for 2026, who goes to Honda then? Unless Chevy is in a position to say, yeah, we're adding 3 more full-time cars, at least, with Andretti. So there always has to be a if a cause and effect type thing. So if Andretti would switch to Chevy, who would have to switch to Honda?
Well, and then of course there's the other factor of is there Honda
if Honda's around? Yes,
in 2026.
So yeah, those are all uncertainties, and who knows? And yeah, it may not be a big deal for Andretti to switch to Chevy for 2026 if everybody has to switch to Chevy for 2026, which remains to be seen. But I think that's just I think it's an interesting thing to talk about this week because there's almost nothing else to talk about. But I'm kind of like, like you said, A, it's not for next year. B, Honda may not be around. So what would it really matter? Everybody would have to switch to Chevy. So, to me, I'm not putting a lot of thought or time into worrying about 2026 at this point, especially with the reckoning that is coming with Honda, whether they stay or go.
So we move on down the field. Arrow McLaren, their lineup set. Pato Ward.
Is it? You never know with McLaren, do you?
Nolan Siegel and Christian Lundgaard. Those are their three.
At least it's set for St. Pete.
Yes.
Probably.
For now.
Maybe.
We think. Likely. And then that fourth car still there for Kyle Larson for the Indy 500. All signs seem to indicate he will be back. Remember, it's a 2-year contract, but something we've kind of debated. Was it a 2 consecutive year contract or just pick 2 in a 5-year window kind of thing? I assume he's back. He won the Brickyard 400. He basically made it sound like he's back for Indy in May. And the issue with those kind of things in the past has been sponsorship. I would guess that Hendrick Cars got plenty of value and publicity out of the sponsorship to make this work.
Well, and I think too is Kyle Larson. His priority is still Cup, and if he went through this season not meeting the expectations that he set for himself on the Cup side, I could see him saying, "Hey, I'm not coming back to the 500 for 25. I need to get my Cup priorities in order. I need to be at the best in NASCAR." It doesn't seem to be a problem. He's still performing at a high level in NASCAR, so that's why I expect him back for 2025. If there was something where he just fell off a cliff in terms of competitiveness in Cup this year, I could see him saying, "Hey, for 2025, I'm just going to focus on NASCAR and Cup." But we haven't seen a drop off from him. As you mentioned, won the Brickyard. I think if anything, that fuels him wanting to come back to compete at the Indianapolis 500 after winning the Brickyard. So I do expect him back for 2025 in May. I just never know with McLaren on what's going to happen. I mean, Pato is safe, right? Unless there's some scenario, otherworldly scenario where he somehow gets an F1 seat, which I don't see remotely possible for 2025. He's not going anywhere. Everybody else, I don't know if Siegel doesn't perform the way they expect him to out of the gate next year. I mean, who knows? So, but at least we know what McLaren is taking in to St. Pete to start the season. But after that, you never know with that team.
No, you do not. That's always the wild card.
It's the great unknown.
Now, this is where I think this gets really interesting, and it's Chip Ganassi Racing. So they have 5 cars this year: Scott Dixon, Alex Palou, Linus Lundqvist, Kevin Simpson, Marcus Armstrong. We both do not expect them to run 5 full-time entries in 2025. Now, we talked about that partnership, the rumor of Ganassi linking up with Meyershank Racing. I would expect Ganassi to run 4 full-time and then farm a car out. Now, Dixon and Palou, they're not going anywhere.
Okay.
After that, I think that's where it gets interesting. I think Kevin Simpson stays, brings a lot of funding. He has had a much more impressive rookie season than I think any of us anticipated when it comes to his performance, based on what we saw coming from Lights. He's 20th in the standings. He's had a string of some struggles, but I mean, he's never so far off the pace, right? It's never like a qualifying issue or anything. I mean, he got caught up in the Toronto madness, or no, he did crash. That was before the madness in Toronto, but I think he's put together a much more impressive season than we expected. He's shown himself well. And then beyond that, Armstrong, Lundqvist, I mean, it feels like anything could happen.
I mean, you look at, do we take this collectively with MSR because they're going to have a partnership. I mean, do we expect, if you look at MSR, do you expect Rosenqvist and Malukas to be the two guys next year?
Yes.
So let's say, for me, I know that Chip Ganassi, he's not as impatient as McLaren is, but he's an impatient dude. Does he have the patience for another year of Kyffin Simpson and Linus Lundqvist? Because for me, it's very difficult for me to judge, especially negatively, rookies because of the learning curve. And I know Linus Lundqvist had a lot more experience than Kyffin Simpson in the ladder. I get it. But at the same time, I just have a hard time judging those two. I look at Marcus Armstrong as maybe that guy, that odd man out. Could he be the guy that's out at Chip Ganassi, but maybe farmed over to Meyer Shank and they run a 3-car program?
I could see that.
It's just hard for me.
One of those guys is going to be farmed out if they keep it how it is with keeping all 5 drivers. And we used to see this, like people would say, oh, this doesn't happen in IndyCar. Well, it used to happen in kart all the time where guys would have a contract and then they'd be farmed out. We saw it with Paul Tracy. We saw it with Tony Kanaan. I'm sure there are countless other examples that I'm forgetting.
Right.
But that was something that was more common where you're under a contract, they farm you out to a different team because they didn't have a spot for you. I believe that's what happened with, who was it? Was it Tracy who he's farmed out to Newman Haas?
Yeah, it was Paul Tracy, as far as I remember. Here's the thing is Chip, has he, this is the key question, has he seen the performance out of his team to justify running 5? And only Chip can answer that. Or Mike Hall, probably. And I don't know if that question has been asked. It definitely hasn't been answered. At least that we've seen. But you look at where they're at in the standings, Palou and Dixon 1 and 3, okay. And then you have to go all the way down to 14th to find Marcus Armstrong, and then it's 18th for Linus Lundqvist and 20th for Kyffin Simpson.
And remember, only 3 of those entries are leader circle eligible.
So
they took essentially the full-time spot of the 4th Andretti, but again, the 4th Andretti was grandfathered into the leader circle.
Right.
Chip doesn't have that luxury. So that's why I think one of those entries is farmed out, and that's why I think it's either Lundqvist or Armstrong. I think they keep Armstrong, they farm out Lundqvist.
I think Kyffin Simpson is safe because of the money he brings, which is a lot.
I mean, he's essentially paying for his ride. He's helping fund Marcus Armstrong's ride, the way I see it. And Armstrong does bring some money. It's not like he's not bringing anything. All these drivers are bringing some money.
Yeah, they're bringing something.
Let's not kid ourselves.
Chip likes winners, but he also likes money. And I think for Chip Ganassi, the big question is at the end of the season or even now is where is he sitting and saying it's been worth running 5 based on the income we're bringing in, the revenue we're bringing in based on performance, or it's not. But I think if any of the money that Kyffin Simpson and or Marcus Armstrong is bringing is helping Alex Palou and Scott Dixon, particularly Alex Palou, then I think you keep him around. It makes sense because Palou is set to win his 3rd championship if he can hold on over the last 5 races, and Scott Dixon has been highly competitive once again.
So you think Armstrong, though, is at risk of being the odd man out?
That's my guy. I would say odds are Marcus Armstrong is the odd man out, either completely gone from Chip Ganassi or farmed out to MSR.
And I feel like it's Lundqvist in terms of being at risk of being farmed out or being completely gone.
I hope Linus Lundqvist gets another year because he's a rookie. He really showed out in the road to Indy. He got a raw deal. A lot of people will say he got a raw deal in terms of not having that direct line into IndyCar from Indy Lights. I hope he gets another year to showcase his skills. Is it with Ganassi? Who knows? But I hope upon hope that he's back with Ganassi. I think he can show some things next year. This year or next year at this time, if he hasn't, I get cutting ties with him. But tough for me to pile on rookies, especially if they're young rookies like Linus.
It's so hard for rookies in this series. I mean, and he has results. I always think of Joseph Newgarden. His rookie year, he didn't have a single top 10.
Right.
His best finish was his first race, and that was 11th at St. Pete. He did have a 12th at Mid-Ohio, and that was it. I mean, there were no results. He was 23rd in the point standings, and then he got better in year 2, got better in year 3, and he just continued to climb. in the standings up until he won his championship in 2017. So
that said, he wasn't racing for Chip Ganassi.
True. That is true. He's
but
racing for
your
a small
point
team.
is well taken.
I mean, rookies need time no matter what team they're with.
Yeah.
I guess is my point.
But I think you look at what Linus Lundqvist has done. He's been on a podium at Barber, finished in the top 10.
Won a pole.
That's right. He won a pole. And I think you look at his recent performances. I mean, since Detroit, 12th, 17th, 15th, 21st, 12th, 13th. I mean, other than the 21st at Iowa 1, that's kind of expectations for a rookie, isn't it? I mean, I think
Yes.
he's performing to what the expectations should be. I mean, if he can finish in the top 15 in points, he's 18th now. I think that's a successful first season. But does Chip Ganassi see it as the same thing?
All right, we move on to Dale Coyne Racing.
Okay.
So this is pick a random driver in F2. I have no idea where to.
Well, I think you start with, for me, Louis Foster. If he
Yes.
holds on and wins lights, I think he's at Coyne in some capacity. Whether it's an entire season, whether it's whatever, that scholarship will come in handy, and I think he's at Coyne next year. After that, I mean, is Harvey back? I have no idea.
I'm going to go with another wild card. Remember, he tested for this team, Enzo Fittipaldi.
Okay.
He tested with Coyne. He's in F2.
Yeah, and I
He's
mean,
mid-pack.
we're hearing other drivers outside of the series starting to throw around. We have the guy from F2 that's testing with RLL, Zane Maloney.
Mm-hmm.
He'll test with RLL.
In fact, he just did, I think, yesterday on the road course
Okay.
at IMS.
You have Nico Veroni, who's a sports car guy that's looking for an opportunity. Unfortunately for Dale Coyne, you really have to look at who has money as opposed to who's the best driver on the market, because that's just where Coyne is right now. So who has the funding? And you look at, could Hunter McElroy put something together? You have Luca Giotto out there. You have Colin Braun out there. You have Toby Sowery out there. I mean, who knows? But I think the one, to me, most likely to be with this team next year in some capacity is Louis Foster, if he holds on and wins the Lights Championship.
Yeah, and that's the key.
Yes.
You have to
money.
bring the funding. Which,
I mean, he's not in a position like Jacob Abel, who has funding behind him, right? I mean, Foster has to win the title.
and I think that's just about a sure thing. But you mentioned Nico Veroni going after a seat. Dixon was always kind of his childhood hero. It's an interesting name. He's had a lot of success. But the key thing is they're working on the sponsorship side. So it's not a done deal for him.
Is there a scenario, you mentioned Jacob Abel and Abel Motorsports, could you see a partnership with Abel and Coyne to run Jacob Abel next year?
No, only because Abel Motorsports, when they ran for the 500, they were a Chevy team. So I don't know if that kind of plays in.
You don't think they're going to switch to Honda for that?
I think
makes sense.
that's my reasoning there.
Gotcha.
But in terms of Coyne, yeah, these are our best guesses. There's nothing valid I think we could throw out there.
No, there's another value. I mean, seriously,
it's a wild guess.
Nobody has any idea. I mean, nobody has any idea who Coyne's going to be running the rest of the season, let alone next season.
Let alone, like, are they still partnered with Rick Ware Racing? Is there a separate team partnership? We've seen different teams come and go with Rick Ware, Team Go. I think there's another I'm forgetting that he's partnered with. So there are several options.
Yeah, you never know what Coyne's got going on. I'm pretty confident he's going to be on the grid, probably with two cars. Who those two guys are going to be, or girls, who knows? I mean, Catherine Legg ran for them. I have no clue. No idea.
Ed Carpenter Racing, I think we expect also some change. Marinus VK currently, and then Christian Rasmussen, who's run quite well. In the other entry, running road and street courses, did the Indy 500, and then obviously Ed Carpenter running the other ovals. I think outside of Carpenter, of course, I think we'll see a completely new driver lineup. I think they will.
Not even Rasmussen?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think VK's gone. I don't know where he goes.
Well, that's somebody we haven't mentioned in any of these teams we've been talking about.
No.
So we have to find a landing spot for VK somewhere.
So I'm going to say if Jacob Abel is not in a Foyt car, I'm going to say he's at Carpenter.
Okay.
As one of the entries. As far as the other entry, I think it'll be someone who's kind of moved around from other teams. And I mean, there are a few options. Like, I don't expect Pietro Fittipaldi to be back at Rahal. I know they're working on that.
Name I was thinking about.
I don't think that sounds like it'll happen. People even thrown out, could Rossi be at that team? I mean, if he doesn't end up at Prima.
Maybe. Yeah.
I guess a name.
I mean, you always throw Connor Daly in there. You never know what could potentially come together with Connor Daly.
You never know, even though he got fired from that team.
You never know.
You never know. Teo Porcher's looking for an opportunity.
Yeah.
Callum Ilott potentially.
We expect Agustin Canapito not back from Juncos?
Correct.
I don't know. I just there's a lot of questions with Carpenter. The only thing we know for sure is that he's going to be in the seat for ovals.
Yes. I don't think Rasmussen's back, not because he hasn't performed well. I just think that team's going to have wholesale changes.
It wouldn't shock me if Rinus VK is back, because I don't know what the market is right now for Rinus VK. A lot of people are saying, well, he's gone. He wants a better opportunity. Has he done enough to prove he deserves a better opportunity? And I'm not saying that's altogether on VK. It's also on the team, but this was a guy that 2 years ago was thought of by several teams as the next big thing. That hasn't materialized. If better opportunities don't materialize, who's to say he's not back?
He has had a string of 3 really good races, and that's going to help his case moving forward if he can finish the back half of the season really strong.
If he can continue to do what he's been able to do of late, that would be very helpful for him in terms of being able to find a potential other landing spot. But I mean, 5 top 5s this year. He's 15th in standings. That's kind of where he's hovered around in his, he's been with Ed Carpenter Racing now 5 years.
Hard to believe.
Right? And it's right around, though, that early teens is where he's been, 12th, 14th, this year 15th. I mean, I think he's hit the apex of what he can do at Ed Carpenter Racing, but I think the biggest question is there another team out there with a better opportunity for him? And I just don't know if that's reality.
So I'm going to go out on a limb and say Porcher and then Jacob Abel, which would be a completely different lineup where you have Abel bringing some funding. I think Porcher would bring a little bit of funding as well. Obviously, a lot of talent and a guy that they could build the team around. Obviously,
I think
Ed as well.
would be a good one.
We move on, and this is where I think we expect a lot of changes. Juncos Hollinger Racing, currently with Roman Grosjean, Augustin Canapino. We both do not expect Canapino to be back. In fact, they had a test at Gateway the other day, and Connor Daly actually was in on the test in for Canapino. Now, could that just have been that Canapino was in Argentina taking care of some things during the summer break? Or is it more of a sign of things to come? Because Connor Daly's run really well at Gateway over the years. That's one of his better tracks. And were they just looking for someone different? Because, look, it's not like Canapino hasn't qualified well recently. Like he had good performances in Iowa in terms of qualifying. Now, the racing is a separate issue.
Yeah.
You simply just he has to be clean, and that's been the problem of late.
Well, and obviously the issues off track have been magnified and not put.
And now they're outside looking in on Leader Circle.
Correct, and actually yesterday, the as we record Friday morning, the test at Gateway was Thursday, and Connor Daly was 4th on the speed charts for Juncos Hollinger. And you talk about keeping it clean. Grosjean apparently crashed at the end of the day, considerable damage to the car at Gateway. But it's been Canapino that's been the guy at Juncos Hollinger that has not been able to keep it clean. Here's the thing, as we know, is that this team needs funding. This team is not going to be long-term financed by its co-owners. Particularly Brad Hollander. He's not going to do it. So this team needs an influx of cash. And who is that person that they can bring in that can bring that? Is it Devlin DeFrancesco?
And that's what the hot rumor is at the moment, that Devlin DeFrancesco will be with Juncos. The other part of the rumor is that Andretti will partner with Juncos and that Brian Herta could move over. I saw that rumor that Brian
really?
Herta could move over and be part of that partnership. So that's the rumor. Now, the thing that you have to figure out, does that mean Juncos switches to Honda next year? Or does that mean it's a strategic partnership like McLaren had with Juncos to start the year, and then it's more of a technical alliance once they have the same engine manufacturer? Because that's the part where I don't understand how this works out, is one's a Chevy team and one's a Honda team. But I think we both expect, based on everything that's out there, that Devlin DeFrancesco is one of the drivers in one of those entries next season, and that it's unclear if Canapino even finishes the season this year in the 78.
Yeah, I mean, the daily in the seat on Thursday could mean nothing. It could mean everything. And we don't really know at this point. I think Romain Grosjean has done enough at Juncos to keep that seat. Consider this. I mean, in 2 years at Andretti, Romain Grosjean was 13th in points. He's 16th in points right now. So not an appreciable drop considering the team that he was at and the team he is now. A couple top 10s recently. Hasn't been on the podium yet, but I think in terms of what the expectations were for Juncos and Romain Grosjean, I think he's done pretty good. Now, over the final 5 races, could he piss the wrong people off in team? Potentially. Could Romain Grosjean feel like, I'm better than Juncos and I don't want to do this for a second year? I don't necessarily get that vibe either. So I do think Grosjean's back. Is it definitely DeFrancesco? Is there an opportunity for Theo Pourchaire there? Who knows? I do know, though, that Brad Hollinger is going to be like, hey, I'm not sponsoring this team alone, pretty much like he has this year.
That's not going to happen again.
No.
I think that's very clear. So, yeah, Grosjean to me feels like a wild card. It's more of, does he want to keep doing this?
That's my biggest thing. I think Juncos would love to have him back. Does Romain Grosjean want to continue to be a midfield guy at best?
And he's run well. He's been solid. I mean, he's with a team that is a midfield team, and I think he's been on the better end of it. Like you mentioned, 16th. I mean, he could finish the season, anywhere based on where he's at points-wise. I mean, he could be on the outside, just outside the top 10. It really just depends on how things shake out. I mean, there are a lot of drivers in that 10th through where Grosjean's at, which is 16th, that are separated by 33 points.
Well, he can make a move if he can keep it clean.
And Graham Rahaal's 2 points behind in 17th of Grosjean. So, I mean, there's a handful of drivers that could finish anywhere when you look at it from 10th to 17th, and they're all separated again by like 34 points.
And I know people say, 4 ovals left of 5 races, there's going to be a lot of potential chaos and move. I mean, I look at Toronto. I mean, all you need is one guy into the wall and a late yellow thrown, and plenty of drivers were taken out. So I look at the potential for chaos as can happen anywhere. I know a lot of people center on ovals, but it can happen anywhere where a good run can go down the tubes. It's all about finishing strong, and that's going to decide not only a lot of these guys and a lot of these entries leader circle, but also what transpires in the offseason. A bad finish to the season for Romain Grosjean, and all of a sudden in a month we're talking about maybe 2 open seats at Juncos. So there's a lot on the line over these final 5 races.
I'm reluctant, but I'm going to go with Grosjean returning, and then obviously DeFrancesco. Seems like there's plenty of smoke for that in the other seat.
That team needs money, and DeFrancesco brings that.
Now we move on. Meyer Shank Racing, obviously. Elia will be back in a third car for the 500. Felix Rosenquist will be back. And then it's, do they keep David Malukas? I think it's pretty simple. As long as that entry's back in the leader circle with David Malukas, he will be back. And I really feel like Gateway will kind of be that deciding race. If he can run well again there, that will probably be enough to get him to return to that team.
He's done tremendous in his 5 races so far this season. Outside of it was Iowa 1.
Yeah, where he spun lap 1.
Ideal, but other than that, finishes of 16th, 12th, 13th, and then 6th at Toronto. I think he's done enough to prove that he deserves a full-time seat for 2025. I think the biggest question for MSR is, do they add a third car, as we mentioned, farmed out from Chip Ganassi Racing, or do they stick with 2 and plus 1 with Elio at Indy?
I think they add that third car farmed out if the money's right.
Very
and
true.
if that's how the partnership agreement works, I think they will be happy to do that.
Yeah, and I think too is, as we know, I mean, Michael Shank, he knows his stuff, and I think we're so quick to forget the struggles that this team had as recently as last year, and the fact that they have a driver in Felix Rosenqvist 13th in the standings, and they haven't had anybody finish that high in the standings since Jack Harvey in 2021 finished 13th. I don't know if Michael Shank is going to say, okay, 1 year, and granted, Felix Rosenqvist has been their only constant this year. We know what happened with Tom Blomqvist and how that went south pretty quick. Is Michael Shank going to be keen enough to say, we've had 1 good year with 1 car, let's expand? I have a hard time thinking Michael Shank is thinking like that. But as you mentioned, if the money's right, if Chip Ganassi is going to say, hey, we're going to fund this car and you're going to run it and we'll throw you some staff, some crew members too, then I think Michael Shank does it. If it's a case of, hey, we'd like you to field a third car and it's up to you to fund it, I don't see that happening.
Then we move on to a team where I think we could have a lot of changes with this team. Rahal Letterman Landing and Racing, Graham Rahal, we expect to be back. He's under contract. We know Christian Lundgaard's gone. Pietro Fittipaldi feels like a toss-up for him to be back in 2025. 4th car for the Indy 500. I'll be honest, I'd be shocked if it's Sada. He ran well for them, but I think he will be looking, if he does return, if...
He's got to find a better ride, is basically what we're saying.
Yeah. I mean, he showed well for them, but I think he's looking for an opportunity to, be on the cusp of an outside shot of winning, and I just don't think that entry provided that, especially in a 4th car. So does he go somewhere else for the 500? I think Pietro Fittipaldi, I think he's had moments, but I just don't think he's been consistent enough.
I mean, no top 10s, right?
No. I mean, he's had some decent runs, but not enough to really show that he for sure should be back. I think he's gone. Look, I think Yuri Vips is in one of those seats. It just seems like they're setting it up for that. As far as the other seat, I mean, they just tested Zane Maloney the other day. I mean, I feel like it'll come down to an F2 driver, which they had a lot of success going that route with Christian Lundgaard. If Teo Pourchaire is available and he doesn't go somewhere else, I think that's a possibility.
Yeah, I think Teo Pourchaire right now would be my favorite to land there. We're going to talk about Prima in a second, but I would say the second most likely destination, in my opinion, for Alexander Rossi is Rahal.
I would agree.
Does that come together? I don't know if RLL has the funding to hire a paid driver. I think Prima somehow is going to have 2 paid drivers, and that's going to be a big draw for Alexander Rossi. That said, it's a new team to the series, but then you could say, well, Prima can't do any worse at the 500, at least in qualifying, that Rahal can. So it goes back and forth, but I wouldn't be shocked if Alexander Rossi is with Rahal next year. Is it likely? I don't think so.
I think that's the fallback if he doesn't go to Prima. And I realize we got out of alphabetical order because I skipped Prima.
But I think Rahal, their top priority would be Rossi.
Yeah, and it should be. Look, if Hy-Vee is back, and all signs point to Hy-Vee is back for next year as a sponsor, Rossi's the perfect driver and fit for that.
I agree.
If you can land it.
I think maybe that's the biggest potential storyline to watch in terms of proven drivers in this series landing somewhere else. Is, can Rahal put together the financial package, the sponsorship package, to make that open seat, whether it's the 30 or the 45, lucrative enough, appealing enough for Alexander Rossi. And for me, I'm kind of hoping so, because this team needs an infusion of something. Graham Rahal's not it, but he's not going anywhere. Lundgaard gave you flashes. He's leaving.
Rossi gives you someone, though, who's going to be competitive on all types of tracks.
Exactly.
And that's what Rahal is lacking at the moment as a team. I mean, Lundgaard, great driver on road and street courses, but he's not going to bring you anything on ovals.
Unfortunately, the last couple of years, the most excited I've gotten for Rahal has been Takuma Sato racing the 500. That's the only time I feel like there's a Rahal driver capable of doing something big. And that's a one-off. They need somebody in there that's going to give them that. Christian Lundgaard gives you potential there, but it was obvious he wasn't the long-term answer there, because any flash he showed, which he has shown this year, he was going to go to another team as a young driver showing potential, race winner, right, last year at Toronto, et cetera, et cetera. But Alexander Rossi, a guy that's trying to hold on being in the series, if Rahal can land him, it'd be, in my opinion, at least as far as we know, with names out there, the coup of the offseason, if Rahal can land Rossi.
Yes, I think that's who they should be going after. I still don't think it happens unless something falls apart with Prima. So Rahal, Vips, and then the Hy-Vee car, whether that's Vips or someone else. We don't
Pourchaire,
expect
maybe?
Fittipaldi. Maybe Pourchaire is a fallback. I'm going to say it's going to be another young driver. I think that Zane Maloney driver, I think he maybe gets the nod, because I think as we move forward, we go to Prima. And I think we both agree on the driver lineup for this team.
Yeah, I think it's Rossi. I think it's Logan Sargent.
Yeah, Sargent out at Williams at the end of the season. Not a surprise. I think the surprise is that Carlos Sainz is joining Alex Albon. I mean, that's a big surprise.
Which, Williams, yes, they've been not good, but they have a direction. And I think that's what sold Sainz on going to Williams as compared to Sauber and other backmarker teams. Is a couple of these teams are absolute clusters. Sauber particularly, and
Alpine.
I mean, but Williams. I mean, people will kind of chuckle going, "You're going from Ferrari to Williams," but I think of those backfield teams in F1, Williams has their crap together in terms of a multi-year plan.
Well, and it's all about anticipating new regulations coming in 2026,
right?
And that's what he's betting on. And that's how it works, right? You have to time your moves correctly. And for Logan Sargent, I mean, IndyCar always felt like something he would be racing in once F1 came to an end. I remember he had a seat fitting with AJ Foyt Racing a couple off seasons ago.
Right.
Didn't actually do the test because he was able to get the Williams Driver Academy deal and then continue on in the F1 ladder and then eventually move up to F1. So that's why nothing further happened, but he did have a seat fitting. So Rossi and Prima, to me, I don't want to say it's a lock for that team, but it feels like the perfect fit. Prima has a new shop that they're converting that's actually in Fishers, basically across the runway from Andretti's new shop.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that like the converted Marsh?
No, that was HMD.
Okay.
They converted a Marsh in Brownsburg.
Gotcha.
So they're putting everything together. They're hiring crew. I want to say they're about like 50% of the way in. They have a 125,000 square foot shop that's across from Andretti, basically across the runway. There's an airport in between there in Fishers,
nice.
which is in
Fancy
Metro
pants.
Indy. Yeah, I think it's like the executive airport or whatever. So a lot of private jets. So pretty ideal for both teams with travel.
I'll say.
But this is them trying to make a splash, and I think both these drivers, and I get that people say, well, Rossi didn't race for Prima and all that, but look, he was in Europe. They know him. There's no set thing as far as who they've talked to, who they haven't, that we know. But I would expect by the time we come out of Gateway,
oh, really?
We have something in terms of a feel for their driver lineup.
I think so. I think there's just so much rumor, and it seems like that's the incessant question: is has Prima signed anybody yet?
They say no.
They say no. Yet
that means they could have everything buttoned up but a signature.
But that's the thing. I mean, are you really going to announce Logan Sargent as one of your drivers next year when he's technically still in a seat for Williams? I mean, that's not going to come out, right? And then Rossi probably wants to keep his options open, but there's no rush with that either in terms of announcing it. So I think Prima has their two guys. It would be surprising. I think in terms of likelihood, Sargent is, in my opinion, 93% Prima. Rossi, I would put it like 80% Prima. So
I'd go 60-40 only because he's got to be convinced that they're going to be ready to go from the start.
And I think if Rahal had any type of 500 success over the last couple years, in my opinion, Rossi would be a favorite to Rahal. But they haven't.
Yes, that's the one thing holding them back, I think, in terms of Rossi's interest. Everything else, they're a big team. They have resources.
I mean, they're talking about adding a fourth car, which is stupid. But for me, you would think, well, I want to go to the proven team over the new team, but it's not like Rahal has done much in May. Who's to say Prima is going to be any worse than Rahal the last couple of years at Indianapolis next year? And if Prima is paying you a lot of money, money talks.
Well, and I think that's why Rossi left McLaren is he didn't feel like he got. I know that he mentioned he wanted a multi-year deal as a 1-year deal, but
right.
I think money was a key factor in all of that.
And job security over 1 year. And I would imagine Prima's offering a multi-year deal.
At least 2 years because they got to get their footing.
Right.
The first couple of years in the series. And then obviously Team Penske, all three drivers locked in.
It's just boring to talk
for
Team Penske, right? They're just all three back. In terms of 2026 and beyond with Penske, do you feel Will Power is reaching the end? Do you see 2026 seeing a change?
Feels like every year is kind of a possibility at this point. As long as he's competitive, I think he stays in that ride.
I think the Will Power of 2 years ago was closer to retirement than the Will Power of now.
I would agree because he's kind of had a resurgence. I mean, he won that second title in 21, then didn't win for a while. Well, he's won 2 races this year. So
he won the title in 22, right?
That's right, 22.
But like last year, I could have.
But he had a lot going on in his personal life last year too that I'm sure impacted his results.
But I think in terms of he's having more fun. I mean, even just after 2021. The 2021 Will Power felt like he was towards the end of his career. But then he comes back, refocused, more relaxed in 22, wins the championship. He goes through what he and Liz and the family went through last year, and then comes back, wins a couple races this year, second in the championship, has a chance to win another title. I just feel like all of a sudden I could see Will Power racing into the second half of this decade. Well into the second half as a full-timer, where 3 years ago I didn't feel like that was going to happen. So I don't know what the next driver change at Penske is going to be. I still would say it's Will Power retiring, but does that happen after next year, after 2026? Who knows at this point. But no changes with Penske for next year.
If you agree or disagree with us, and I'm sure you may disagree because, well, who knows what's going to happen with our silly season predictions. They're sure to be wrong. We know that. We'd love for you to interact with us. You can find us at newtrackrecordpodcast.com. While you're there, sign up for the email list. It is free. Also, you can check out the store. We have t-shirts and stickers in there for you. You can follow us on social media, IndyCar Podcast on Twitter /X, on Instagram, on Facebook. Just search for New Track Record. Also, our email, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. You can support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord on there. And as always, you can download and listen for free on your favorite podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, Overcast, CastBox, Player FM, YouTube Music, wherever you get your podcasts, download and listen for free. Okay, quickly go through the mailbag, Justin.
Yes, sir.
And we look at where things stand, and a lot of people commenting. We'll get to some Zach Brown comments in a bit. This is P56 front in regards to a number of entries, and saying, I like 24 as a standard number. Each team could be allowed a wild card entry per season outside of the Indy 500 for an IndyCar rookie driver, which could be sold or traded. Need to leave some room for partial budget drivers like the Indy Lights champ. Again, 24 to 26 is the perfect number in my opinion.
I would say 23 to 26 is fine. 20 is not enough, but 27, 28
is probably too much.
Probably too many.
And we didn't have any contraction when we went through our silly
That's what the
season
thing. I mean,
predictions.
maybe we'll tackle that next week. Is go through and say maybe who's most likely to potentially contract.
Yes.
Do we expect everybody to have the same amount of cars? That rarely happens from year to year.
This from Zaner_Ridge. Saying, great episode, guys. Love the pod. I do have a question regarding the hybrid. Do you think this will give us a chance at 1,000 horsepower cars once they're maxed out? And with more power, baby, improve on-track battles? Yes. I think there's a chance at getting close to 1,000 horsepower, but I don't think they'll actually reach that number.
Does it help the on-track product is what the biggest thing for me is.
I think once they dial it up, it will help.
But everybody's going to have it. So that's my thing is you're adding it to everybody on track. So does it add to the show, or is it just a fun, point to Indy cars as back to 1,000 horsepower or close to it? I think it definitely checks the box of the ladder, just to say, but does it seriously impact the on track product? I don't know.
Zach Brown had this comment to say, this Pelot situation has kind of unfairly branded us as being difficult and we're tough on drivers when actually I think our relationship with our drivers is one of our greatest strengths.
Now, we're not privy to behind the scenes, but
and clearly their relationship is good enough that, they still had David Malukas using, their workout facility, right?
Yeah.
When he was rehabbing, and Teo Porcher obviously coming back to the team. But a lot of people had thoughts on this. Lynn_IndyCar said, I think little Dave won't agree with you. How smart does MSR look and how dumb does McLaren look over that decision? Well, I guess McLaren, shockingly, needed the funding. I don't know what else to say, right?
Yeah, McLaren can deny it, but it seemed like that was the reasoning.
And then he adds, obviously the story about Teddy and French publication has some interesting details before it was taken down. Yeah, a multi-year contract.
Right.
Don't even get me started on Rossi. I think Zach is drinking too much McLaren Kool-Aid. Well, he is McLaren, so of course he's drinking the Kool-Aid. DJ_Maldonado says, gotta admire that tremendous self-awareness. Well, Zach's going to speak his mind. That's one thing we do like about him.
Yes, absolutely.
Zaner_Ridge says, say what? How can you blame Pelot for Chip Ganassi saying you can't leave? McLaren make their own decisions. Yeah, Pelot was under contract to Ganassi, and then
Correct.
McLaren tried to poach him. It's just Zach Brown and Chip dueling back and forth. And then this from NK Harden. So the 7 drivers scheduled to run for McLaren this year, it isn't one of the 5 that they in all caps, rotated through that gave them the bad reputation. It's the one that left them at the altar that's to blame. Kind of just sounds like a jealous ex, to be honest. I like that.
That's good stuff.
I like that. Elsewhere on the mailbag, this from Ed Joris. When you analyze the IndyCar drivers title, both Pelot and Dixon will get grid drops, so maybe power, so something to keep in mind with engine situation. And also a couple of well wishes from Chad 200 and Mom 2X over 2002 on the baby. Appreciate that. Mom 2X over 2002 said, P.S. This is at the end. Don't look at the hospital bill. $250,000 to $500,000 baby for us. Yeah. Hospital bills seem made up.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Well, you're like, it does. It just seems like an arbitrary number.
It will work out.
Insurance.
I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
We have good insurance, and there are other things that I'm not stressed about it. Thankfully, that's the one thing that we're not stressed about at all.
It's just a number.
Yes. Poet Shevchenko said, would have been nice for IndyCar to meet the fans halfway with a good race, let alone 2 races. That, in regards to Hy-Vee, had a press release saying the race weekend produced record attendance, increased social media engagement. Cool. That doesn't seem to matter when it comes to your on-track product.
No. And we'll touch on the test from yesterday regarding that on-track product here shortly.
In terms of silly season rumors, so I posted the poll, which 2025 IndyCar silly season move is least likely to happen? Least likely, again, that's the key phrase. Rossi to Prima led the way, 37.5%. Sargent to Prima, 28.5%. Di Francesco to Juncos, 22%. Nearly 12% of you said Malukas to MSR. Because, again, he's not confirmed for 25. It's just this season. A couple of replies on that. Historic Hot Lap says Di Francesco is the only one that seems like a more confirmed rumor. I'm all in on Di Francesco to Juncos for the next move. Solid list, though. I feel like they will all happen given some time. Well, I guess that's kind of the point, right, is to make it as difficult of a guess as possible. And that's kind of where we're at.
Yes.
And people with thoughts, of course. So I reposted our thread on how to watch IndyCar in 2025. And this is a good addition. OBX Jody said, it's not watching, but the crew at IndyCar Radio do an excellent job from qualifying to the race. Yeah, they do practice sessions as well. So we'll get to Venu Sports and all that in a second. But don't forget IndyCar Radio when you factor in ability to listen. And then also Daguerre saying you get a subscription for a year for $29 US with an IP address in Albania, talking about Venu Sports. So you can work the IP address VPN game if that's your cup of tea.
Yeah, if
reduce
you
prices.
can figure that stuff out.
But again, we have a whole thread. We reposted it the other day. So that's a look in the mailbag. We continue on and take a look at news and notes. And we didn't talk about this driver in regards to potential IndyCar options. But Jamie Chadwick finally confirmed for her first IndyCar test. It'll be September 30th at Barber Motorsports Park with Andretti Global. I almost said Autosport, caught myself. But I don't think she'll be an IndyCar driver next year, but I think she is definitely on the radar for 2026.
I would hope she's not in IndyCar next year. I don't think she's quite ready. And I think that it would be great to see her compete for a championship in lights next year.
I would agree. Now, if she finishes the season really strong, maybe that changes the conversation. But here's the thing. It's not like she's going to be able to move up into a really solid ride.
Correct.
Unless, and I mentioned this before on the podcast, unless, what if Ray Hall wants to go after Chadwick, and that's a way to make a splash with one of their entries? Yeah,
potentially. I still think, though, Chadwick is going to be loyal to Andretti.
Yes.
And try to move up with them.
Speaking of Andretti, so they had that test at Gateway, a 9-car test. Andretti went 1, 2, 3 in that test. The bad news, though, is that it seems to be shaping up the same as Iowa, which is not good.
Not good.
This from Kirkwood. He said, we tried to follow each other at the end, and we couldn't get within a second of each other, so qualifying going to be super important. Again, you can only do so much with the cars being maxed out on weight. You can only go to so soft of a tire. It is
so
what
much
it is.
Downforce, and I just it's tough for me. I just don't feel like IndyCar is as treating this as urgently as it should. I mean, I just don't feel like IndyCar is saying this is a serious problem. We need to figure this out ASAP. And maybe they just don't have the ability to do it. I mean, we know that NASCAR and Cup have a wealth more resources in terms of being able to put something down on the track, or better turnaround time on a new tire or a new setup. I don't know, but it just doesn't seem like IndyCar has the urgency that it should with these issues, particularly with 3 more ovals and 4 more oval races left to go.
Yeah, I mean, you got to put a good product on for the tracks in order for the tracks to sell tickets.
Right, especially Gateway and Nashville. I mean, like, you know, your big return to Milwaukee. I mean, if you have stinkers at Milwaukee, what's that say about going forward? I just don't sense that IndyCar has any type of urgency to fix this ASAP. And it's unfortunate.
Yes. Elsewhere, Andretti Global released a video. President J.F. Thorman, who's one of the part owners now of that team, they're planning to expand its operation into the NASCAR Cup Series. Remember, Marco is running in some truck series races and the ARCA Menard series, and I think they sponsor some other drivers in ARCA and trucks with Gamebridge and that partnership. So this seems to be something that's all but going to happen. It's just a matter of time, and it depends on what happens with other teams selling in NASCAR, getting rid of their charters. They've been talking about this for years, so this is not a big surprise.
Yeah, and that's something we haven't heard about recently, is about charters for IndyCar. So what's that look like?
Yeah, still waiting on that answer. Also, Venu Sports. So we said we'd talk about it. The launch price, $42.99 a month. Again, remember, this includes a lot of channels. This is not like Peacock where it's just NBC-related properties. Price tag is high, but again, it includes ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU, SEC Network, ACC Network, ESPN News, ABC, Fox, FS1, FS2, Big Ten Network, TNT, TBS, True TV, ESPN Plus. All right, that was a mouthful. Doesn't okay? Yeah, that's all of them. So it includes all those channels. If you're a sports fan, you can pretty much get by with this and Peacock, and you're set.
Yeah,
that's the selling point to me. So,
are you going to dabble?
I don't think so, because we have a good setup with YouTube TV. And again, you can look at the thread in terms of how to watch IndyCar next year. I get people are going to complain about the price, but if you're a fan of other sports beyond IndyCar, look, if you're just an IndyCar fan, yeah, it sucks. I can't disagree. But if you're a fan of other sports, football, basketball, whatever, like this pretty much covers all the bases.
Yeah, it does. And I also saw this. I had an email in my inbox a couple days ago that my Peacock subscription is going up to $8 a month.
Yeah, that's expected.
It is, but I'm just saying, so people kept saying, oh, I get this for $6, $6 a month. Well, everything goes up, and now Peacock is going up. So, Well,
think about it. They raised the price right after the Olympics. It makes sense.
That is true, which they have had really good ratings for the Olympics.
Oh yeah, and streaming numbers as well. I mean, we're streaming the Olympics 5-6 hours a day at the hospital. So
yeah, it's something to have on. Randomly.
The coverage has been outstanding.
It definitely has been. And anytime I don't know, I haven't been this obsessed with Snoop Dogg since the late 90s, early 2000s. Man, like they show him. What was I watching that he was at? Oh, it was skateboarding, and he was there, and I was like, "This is amazing that Snoop Dogg's at skateboarding."
And then two other notes. So the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is an EA Sports College Football 25 with the Team Builder mode. Search for IMS Brickyarders, and you get the wing and wheel logo at midfield, special uniforms as well. They also have a 2025 Indy 500 set, so that's pretty cool. And then this just came down minutes ago. Juan Montoya back in NASCAR with Mobile One for their 50th anniversary. Remember, Graham Rahal had that incredible car at Laguna Seca in IndyCar, but he will drive the number 50 Mobile One Camry XSE at Watkins Glen. So back on a road course for 2311 racing. So
how about
very
that?
Cool.
That's cool.
And with that, time for our random split air driver of the week.
All right, we're going to the fertile ground that is the 2006 Champ Car season, and we're going with Antonio Pizzonia.
Who?
Antonio Pizzonia was a Brazilian professional racing driver. He competed in the Champ Car World Series in 2006. He also had a start in 2008 in IndyCar at Long Beach. But in his 3 races with Rocket Sports in Champ Car in 2006, had finishes of 11th, 10th, and 12th, which sounds good, but there weren't very many cars.
Yeah, there were like 17 cars.
in that series. His best finish was 10th at Surfers Paradise. He actually did 20 starts in Formula One with Jaguar and Williams from 2004 through 2005. So that was previous to his racing in Champ Car and IndyCar. But he was just done after 2006, then appeared in 2008. He did some Super League Formula racing. After that, then did some Stock Car Brazil. Was a lot of years in Stock Car Brazil. But it was that heyday of Brazilian drivers, right, in open wheel in North America. And he did 3 races. He came up through Formula Renault and F3, and was actually in 2004 replaced Ralf Schumacher at Williams.
In 2003, he was replaced by Justin Wilson.
Oh, how about
Jaguar.
That? But he did karting, came up, did Formula One, as we said, and then he drove for in Champ Car World Series. He returned to the team towards the end of the season, but did not have sponsorship to race, and so came in as a late replacement. I think it was another split air driver of the week, Tonis Kazmits.
Yes, I do remember him,
who did not have enough sponsorship to race. So he was just did that one race. He's actually in 2003 did the Boss GP series. He raced a Dallara T12, which I think is an old Formula One car, or I think like a F3 car, something like that. Anyway, he's still racing, apparently, mostly down in South America. He is 43 years old, so he was very young when he did Formula One and Champ Car. But that was it. Just 3 races and done. Had that token experience in IndyCar in 2008. Then did a lot of Stock Car Brazil, GT Brazil, and Formula 3000 in early 2000s. And, of course, Formula One, as we mentioned. But that's it. Still around, still trying to race down in South America, but just 3 races in Champ Car in 2006 with Rocket Sports. Mr. Antonio Pizzonia, this week's Random Split Era Driver of the Week.
All right, that does it for us. For Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. We'll be back next week as the IndyCar summer break continues, hopefully with some driver moves on the horizon. This has been New Track Record Podcast.